And welcome back. It's time for Opinion Court. Please do get in touch with us on 22422. That's our SMS line. If you're online, please use the hashtag Opinion Court. That's one word. We have a heavy conversation ahead of us tonight. And joining me in studio to my immediate right is Noella Msundi. She's a Public Relations and Communications Manager at the Kenya Red Cross. Next to her is Macharia Gaitho, an independent journalist who often comments on governance issues. Professor Edward Kisiangani is our resident political analyst, and of course you'll remember earlier on in the program we hosted Professor George Korda, who is a former water PS as well as a hydrologist. So you're all welcome to the program. Noella, I want to begin with you with an update, if you like. What would you say is the situation countrywide, if you like, regarding the floods?
Thank you, Anne. So the heavy rains, they continue to be experienced across the country. We are talking of the Coast Region, Lower Eastern, Upper Eastern, and Rift Valley, and also the West Kenya region. Right now, about 50,000 households have been actually affected, displaced. That translates to about 280,000 people. We're also talking of deaths, which they're now at 158 countrywide. We have injuries, about 84 people. Health facilities have either been submerged or, flooded. Right now, we are talking of about 42 health facilities. We all know that actually there's an issue with the access to schools. They've also been submerged or washed away. Or even some schools, actually, children are unable to go to school because they're actually serving as areas of refuge for the families that have been displaced. Infrastructure, we've seen actually roads have actually been really affected. Bridges, also water infrastructure. It's actually a big disaster because now with the floods, then you get the actually sweeping sanitation facilities. That water is flowing into residentials, even within the camps now we've been able to set up. Then it's a crisis, Anne.
Right. How would you say this particular situation compares in terms of scale to other floods?
If I'm to look, the worst floods were the 1997-1998 Del Nino. That one, it was really very severe. Then fast tracking a little bit to the 2006-2007 floods, also they were quite extreme, and the current floods can actually be compared to the 2006-2007 floods. And what we are saying, really, it's reached to a proportion of it being declared a national disaster because it's a disaster. We are talking of, 280,000 people. The numbers may be rising. We are talking of children under 5s, newborns, pregnant mothers, lactating mothers, the elderly, chronically ill. It's a disaster, really.
It should be declared a national disaster.
It should be declared a national disaster because those numbers keep surging.
Okay.
Yes.
Professor, I have two profs today, you see, now. That's the challenge. Professor Korda, if I begin with you, would you say that this disastrous situation we're seeing is purely out of, if you like, our vulnerability to the vagaries of weather? Or is this something that could have completely been avoided on various levels?
Well, it's very difficult to say that we could avoid such weather situation. The amount of rain that we have received in quick succession basically implies that the rivers would be overflowing, there would be floods in many places. But it's also true that our vulnerability has increased because of our management of the water towers, our management of land cover. My inclination is that we have mismanaged the catchment, and therefore water is rushing down and not infiltrating to replenish groundwater system. That could be part of the problem.
Macharia, Mother Nature or us?
Obviously, it's a very sad situation. A large part of it is Mother Nature, and it's very hard to fight Mother Nature, whether you're in Kenya or in the US or Switzerland or anywhere else. But the thing is that we do know seasons, and we can predict with pretty good accuracy that every 5 years or every 7 years there will be this magnitude of floods. And then we can take the preventive, what we need to the preventive measures we can take. You see, a small, just a few inches of rain in Nairobi, and the roads are flooded and they are washed away. That is not Mother Nature. That is simply our refusal to fix our drainage systems. Okay, up country you might call it that. And as the professor said, a lot of the water is just washing away on the surface. It is not going where it is supposed to go, which is soaking into the ground, because we have messed up our catchment areas. A long time ago, we used to be very strict. No cultivation within a given area of from on riverbeds. Building gabions and terraces and all those things which prevent those kind of washaways we are seeing. Today, those systems have completely collapsed. On the lower Tana, that floods were so well programmed because KenGen announced in good time that the dams along the Seven Forks system are full and they are going to open them to release water. What happened? They opened them. 3 days later, the water is reaching the Tana Delta. And also you must ask, those are floodplains. Why do we allow people to settle on floodplains? We know that every 5 years or every 3 years, there is going to be rainfall of a certain nature. Whatever you do, those guys are going to be displaced by floods. As simple as that.
Yeah. Okay, Prof, somebody said to me today, and not to make light of it, is that the two things Kenyans cannot handle: one, a presidential election, and two, water.
Maybe that is overstretching the imagination, because maybe presidential elections can be managed. You can do a repeat without probably causing too much damage. But our management of this situation that we're finding ourselves in is in the short term, we have serious governance issues related to how we manage our water resources, including how we have abused our environment, made sure that ensured that there are no trees in some places. But the bigger issue is that there is a warning that there is a major disaster in the offing, and it is going to happen, and we must do something about it. You see, at the general international level, we have been told about global warming, and we contribute to this. Global warming is supposed to cause an irregular temperature rises in the Pacific and even in the Indian Ocean. And basically what it does is, because we have destroyed the ozone layer, the North Pole and South Pole, which has billions of tons of frozen water, start melting and raise the temperatures of the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. When it does that, that's when you get tsunamis. You also get, this kind of situation, floods, and then long droughts being experienced. Now, that is something that we must think about. Now, when we do at a local level, we destroy our environment, cut trees, we burn charcoal, we destroy even the local ozone layer and contribute to this global warming. So in the long run, we must be ambassadors towards working over a strategy that will make the world safe from global warming. That is at the international level. And I don't think this government is doing much to make sure that we make our contribution to save the world from global warming. But now at the local level, again, we have politicized the way we manage land and water resources. When you tell people that, you are cutting forests, they say, these forests are not more important than human beings. Then they cut trees, leave the surfaces vulnerable, like my brothers are saying, then you end up with this kind of thing, so that when the water rain goes on for just 2 days, the soil is very weak, and then the flow has a higher speed than if there was forest. So we must think from the internal level.
But beyond even the politicization, for instance, especially when it came to conserving water towers, etc., I think that's when we saw the worst of it. But we are unable to do basic things like what he's talking about in terms of gabions, etc., we are unable to harness water, to conserve it, to store it. We are unable. I don't know why we are unable. And since you have been a water PS, why is that? Why are we not able to do this? What is so complex about it? Or is it purely a lack of political will to do it?
There are several reasons why things go the way they are now. I think partly we have invested poorly in regulatory institutions. You will find that Water Resources Authority and other regulatory authorities are not well financed, and consequently they lack the capacity even to enforce certain regulations. But I may also hasten to add that institutional conflicts, mandates sometimes are not clear, and therefore one ends up with conflicting situations. But not that we are completely unable. I think we know what to do. It is just that we don't do it.
And that is why I'm asking why. What is it about us that this has completely failed us?
I think some things should be so simple. We used to have chiefs and agricultural officers right down at the village level, educating people and enforcing what they're trying to educate people on. Things like don't cultivate within 50 meters of the riverbed, leave it with vegetation.
Right.
Things like those. Of your own shamba, plant terraces, plant rows and rows of sisal or whatever to hold the soil if you're on a slope. Things like those, that even people knew that as you're a farmer on your shamba, there are things you must do. Today it is open season. You're seeing people cultivating right to the edge of the river.
Yeah.
When it rains, all that soil everything is washed away.
But Macharia, you also know.
And you can look at it, look at the Tana River when you drive down there. If upstream was well managed, you would see very clean water flowing. What you see is a mixture of mud and water.
But also the bigger problem is that Anne is asking, why are we in this kind of situation?
But the governance thing.
There are governance issues.
Yeah.
People know what is right. There are laws. But the first people who break the laws are government. You saw the other day in Muranga, there was this story about the land mudslides, and then they were saying that, look, the government even advised, this place is not safe, you should move away. Then they said, we are not boarding. And so what they're saying is that we are not moving out. You just find a solution. So even implementation of the law, the officers who are in charge of implementing the law, if you start, growing food crops near the river, nobody can implement that. In fact, they don't have capacity. So we have a poor culture in terms of observing the rule of law. There are enough laws to do these things, but because the first people who break the law are the top guys in government, then the lower people just follow suit. Who has been cutting our forests? People talk about these things, Anne. You go to Mount Elgon, you go to Mount Kenya. Do you think a person like me or Macharia, you can walk in with an axe and start cutting trees, and you will be shot dead? But the people who cut trees in our water towers are big people in government. And so the other guys say, now, we are small guys, why are you following us? So then, in the end, there is no Mao. You know the politics that have surrounded Mao. Mount Elgon, Anne is going. And the people who have been cutting trees in Mount Elgon are government officials, because they can prevent it. When you go to Mount Kenya, it is the same. This Mount Kenya, in the last 60 years, 70 years ago, Mount Kenya forest was near Sagana. And now look at where it is. These are problems that we do. We need a leadership that can tell us the law is the law. If you break the law even on your own land, you must be punished for that. The people don't punish others for making these mistakes.
But while that is true, that we enforce the law, if people do not participate and make decisions by themselves, it is very difficult to guard a water tower. We are not going to put the military to guard a water tower. I think there is a whole need for changing the social infrastructure, how people think about these resources. I think there is a feeling that short-term value is more important than long-term values, and consequently people do things for short-term gains. They don't see the long-term repercussions of their actions. And so people must wake up and participate.
And that's quite true in terms of the challenges with our culture. A lot of our value system, it is all short-term with no thought of consequences, and that's true. But let me put it as an open question to the panel, because we've heard a lot of if you like, reservations expressed about the manner in which national agencies have dealt with this disaster. Many saying they were slow, they were not coordinated, they were bickering. All manner of allegations have been raised about it. Having said that, do you believe that once the dust settles, there is some kind of liability that should be placed squarely at the doors of government officials who hold key dockets that could have in one way or another averted this crisis by either responding faster, regularly? If you're talking about like the dam incident that took place yesterday, that they should have carried out certain checks, they should have closed down some of these things. Do you think we need to get to the place where there's that kind of accountability, even criminal possibly?
I think so. Wherever something happens, it may be unforeseen or whatever, but there must be some accounting. Is it purely natural, or is there an element of neglect? What could have been done to prevent it? As simple as that. Then when it happened, how did we respond? Our disaster response mechanism, I think, is often not up to scratch. And here I would want to commend the Red Cross, because they're the ones we see. We have a whole bureaucracy in the office of the president. I'm not quite sure what they do. And they have at their beck and call all the forces they can in terms of the police, the military, the National Youth Service. By the time they get their act together, Red Cross has been on the ground for 3 days.
And you know, one of the questions...
And maybe we're talking about declaring this a national disaster. I think if we do declare it a national disaster, we might also ask the government to step aside for a while and hand over things to the Red Cross. Speaking of
national disasters, of course, there is the clause that can be triggered constitutionally in terms of when a county government is unable to deal with, any situation when they are overwhelmed. And I wonder whether from your own assessments, counties like that of Tana have been completely unable to cope, and that it is necessary to trigger constitutional provisions to have national government come in. Because if you're talking about it being on the scale of a national disaster, I mean, are you saying that there are counties that are completely overwhelmed and cannot help themselves and need national government to move in aggressively?
Yes, and counties like, Tana River, Kilifi, Garissa, you're talking of Kisumu, which have actually been really affected by these floods. When you look at the scale of these flood crises that we are in, it's really at a, it's at a national scale. And sadly, we don't even have a disaster bill in this country at a national level. County governments have been trying to actually put in place disaster bills at the county level. But you see, for you to have a disaster bill, it also comes with a financial obligation. Most counties may not be able to actually deal with their own disasters within the counties. And that's why you get now agencies like the Kenya Red Cross, other non-state stakeholders, national government, the county government itself, coming together, joining hands, and having, a coordinated, multi-agency response. Even if you talk about, let's say, disasters that fall squarely, on the national government, we are all government, and in one way or the other, then we all participate towards disaster preparedness and disaster response. If you're to talk about really building resilient communities in this country, then all of us have to be part of that process.
I suppose I'm wondering, like if you were to think of other jurisdictions, take for instance America and how they handle disasters. At some point they will call in the National Guard, and at that point, whatever federal state will take a step back for the National Guard to come in and move. And when I wonder about this in the context of the case of calling this a national disaster, do you think that it's like, for instance, Tana River, we talked about 70% of the county being underwater, and I leave that as an open question really to everybody. Is that the point where a governor should say, look, national government, I need you to come in and do something.
And you raise an important question. That is really the job of the governor. The governor can do that. Maybe they have done it without informing us. Maybe they have done it. But then, the most important thing you look at, especially with regard to floods, if you look at the Water Act 2002 and as revised in 2012, it says water, control of water use is vested in the state. Very clear. That is the opening part of that act. So the state must make sure that it controls water to the point that it doesn't become a security risk to citizens. So what we're discussing here is a question of safety and security. It is purely in the hands of the national government. If you look at the dam that has killed our people, is it possible that no government official at national level or county level so that this dam is built on quicksand and it poses a future security risk? Why do people earn salaries to watch over disasters? They earn salaries, they should be taking. This is a danger, we don't want it. Now, you can see people will tell you they want somebody. Somebody in the government, there's a team in the office of the president. This is why they earn salaries. They must say, this tree we are seeing in your compound it's one time going to collapse, to fall, and it will fall on your house. So this is a huge dam with a lot of water in it, and somebody should have said, this is not right. Now, Now, when you look at the issue of Tana River and the coastal counties, we were warned by the meteorological department a couple of months ago that there are going to be floods. So therefore, this is not quite unexpected. Now, once you do that in government, you must map out areas that are likely to be disaster zones and then be prepared to deal with them. But it looks like, I don't think even probably people in government know where the next disaster is going to occur. And this is the problem. Why do they earn salaries for ignorance?
Wow.
And it's a very complex issue. I don't think one is able to say that the national government was negligent or the county government did not report in time. I think there is a whole inertia in the system that the officer on the ground reports and probably hits a wall and stops there. And then another officer elsewhere does not receive the information and therefore has nothing to act upon. And then the national government is still waiting for information to reach them.
From the ground.
From the ground. And so it's a question of coordination, a question of ensuring that whoever is in charge, as my brother says, acts on it. And here I would like to mention the role of the media. There are situations in which when nobody acts, call the media, go and tell the media, this is what we are seeing. We have experts here. And so this is what we expect. You have done your job.
Whistleblowing in a sense,
yeah, but not to go home and say, but I had warned them. I don't think that's a good attitude. So there are opportunities which are available in a democratic system, and these opportunities are not being utilized for the safety of the many.
I wonder whether you would all agree with what we've heard in the last few days, the proposals in terms of collapsing relevant agencies into one management system, one kind of authority with funding that has been set aside and is secure, that does not need, any further interventions from Treasury and the like. I think Sakaja, the Nairobi senator, has proposed this alongside other colleagues. Do you think that would help to centralize disaster management under an independent authority that can in itself be a first responder, has the financing to do it, rather than this sort of interagency coordination that does not seem to be running smoothly?
That would work, but the bigger question will not be, even if you collapse it, probably to reduce the red tape. What is important is, what do we do with people who don't do their job? Because even when you put them together, and
they might still collectively not do their job.
What do we do with people who don't follow the law, who don't perform their duties? This is the big question Kenya is facing today. People break the law, they go unpunished. We are discussing impunity. Impunity is defined as people breaking the law, but they know you can do nothing about it. They will not take the punishment. So we did a situation, whatever thing they do, even reducing the red tape will be one positive thing, but it must also be accompanied by a series of measures that will make it impossible for people to break the law and still come back and earn salary, take tea in Nairobi and say, sorry, we shall have prayers tomorrow for those who died. This is not good for our country. And it's something that if we discuss a national disaster today, the kind of national disaster we should be discussing is a disaster of lawlessness in this country, of people just refusing to obey the law or doing their job, but very quick to go to the bank to pick their cash. So that is a very important thing.
Another thing is, I am not sure that having what you might call a standing army to deal with disasters is a very wise thing. It will be very expensive, and they will be idle most of the time because disasters don't happen every day. But we have an existing disaster response system, which basically is supposed to be like a coordination center. And it can call on the Red Cross, it can call on units of the military, it can call on the police and the national, all these other agencies. Now, if that system could be made to work properly, that would be the way to go. So let's just find out what is wrong with that system and put in place the things that can make it work properly.
And the visibility, I think, of government on the ground.
It must have a clear, one of the things we don't have is a clear command structure. Because anytime there's a disaster of that sort, the fellows at Nyayo House or wherever it is they sit, they call on the military, they call on the Red Cross, they call on the police, everybody converges there, but then they find there's nobody in charge. I've watched that, whether it is a bomb explosion somewhere,
or a fire,
or a flood. They all converge, but there's nobody in charge. Who is in charge? That is one of the biggest problems we have is with disaster response in this country. And then you start finding bickering and tough wars and all these things.
Yeah. As we wind up, Noella, we chatted earlier, and you said to me that especially in Tana River, you have seen things that would make grown men cry. It being that dire. Red Cross, of course, has launched that appeal. You can speak to our audience this evening in terms of where can Kenyans really help out their fellow Kenyans.
Okay, the Kenya Red Cross launched an appeal, and we are seeking to help about 150,000 families. We are saying as the Kenya Red Cross, we will comfortably support 150,000. Of course, we have other agencies who can also come in. We have the county governments, we have the national government to also chip in and support the rest of the families. Our response is mainly recovery, and right now we are talking about deaths, the injured, we are talking about infrastructure, being destroyed, we're talking about, health facilities, but the most crucial thing that most of us are not talking about is recovery. When the rains actually settle, when the dust settles, what are these families going to do? They don't have a roof above them. Yeah. They've lost, all their economic, power. Disease outbreak is on the rise. Health facilities within their areas of residence, actually, they're destroyed. How are they going to recover? How are they going to get back on their feet? We're talking of, heads of homes. We're talking of the men, mothers, children, right now squeezing within, a very small shelter that we've tried to put up. But it's very interim. So I think the most crucial, what we are saying as the Kenya Red Cross, really we are asking Kenyans to support us, to be able to support these vulnerable communities. We'll support them through reconstruction of, shelter. We are doing also, for them to be able to recover their livelihoods, for them to be able to go back on their feet and really Kenyans have always been very good. We've just come from drought, I forgot to mention. The same counties experiencing floods, they've just come from experiencing the drought. So the recovery period between the drought and the floods was very minimal. They never recovered. So it's a double tragedy for them. So they lost everything. Pastoralists have lost actually their livestock completely. Some actually are going to harvest. A place like Tana River, the standing crops, they're going to harvest. Right. Then all of it was swept away. So what Kenyans can do is to support us. We have a pay bill number, 10,000, and account name is Floods. Also, we have quite a number of bank accounts which we've been sharing on our platforms and also sharing in the media. What you're saying, let's be our brother's keeper. We can say, yes, it's been too much, we are tired of helping, but if we don't help a neighbor, then who will help them? We can't wait for help from outside. Actually, it's just our responsibility, we've always been our brother's keeper, to step in and try to help those in need.
Let's take a look at what you're telling us online. And we are the Patel Dam tragedy. Heads should definitely roll. 44 people have lost their lives, and we cannot deny the fact that corruption has led us here. This Solai story is extremely heartbreaking, saddening. More is the impunity and corruption exhibited. The problem with government's policy is that it is reactive to issues rather than being proactive, hence forestalling danger like the Solai one. And the blame game begins. Those supposed to monitor blaming Patel, Patel blaming victims for residing downstream. Some dams getting filled, bursting and causing tragedy, but others are at 30% like Ndakaine. Mama, give us a signal. Condolences to the bereaved families. Those are your views, and there are so many this evening. Unfortunately, we can't read them all out, but we are certainly most grateful. Of course, here at Citizen TV, our hearts go out to our brothers and sisters who have lost life, livelihood. It's horrible. It's horrible, and we encourage you to help out and to follow Kenya Red Cross online. We'll be giving, of course, information on bank accounts, as you've heard, and of course their pay bill number. That's our time tonight. Thanks for watching Opinion Court. I am Ann Kiguta. Good night. God bless. God keep you safe. Bye-bye.